Hi Phil, how you doing?
Tony, I'm really good. How are you? Good to see your face again.
Yes, all good. Yes, recently back from holiday, like your good self. How was yours?
Mine was really good, thank you. Just the typical Lanzarote holiday, which was pool, pool bar, buffet, pool, bar, buffet, a terrible Oasis tribute act, and flamenco dancing. I believe you went to an island named after one of the things in our industry, which I love about you, Tony. Where did you go?
Not for that reason. No, we went to Rhodes. Yes, we
Like
did.
it.
Yes, unfortunately, it was that tricky week when a lot of the island was on fire. So the first couple of days were exciting for all the wrong reasons, but a great holiday after that.
You sent me a lovely video of you on a lilo enjoying a beer, so I don't think you were in too much danger.
Well, no, not by that point. Yes, oh God, I'd send you that video. Um,
It was 10 a.m.
Yeah. So since our last podcast, Phil, you remember we did our we called it what grinds your gears out on the road, the things that frustrate drivers, and we surveyed our drivers to find out. But it transpires that we started a trend, Phil.
Oh, go on.
So confused.com have just published their version of the very same thing. So I'd like to think that confused.com, aspiring to the great heights of the Driver Hire podcast, are following in our footsteps. But they've surveyed their customers to find out what frustrates them out on the road.
We should have copyrighted that, shouldn't we? Honestly. Those little fellas at confused.com copying our worldwide podcast. Fair play to them. Well done.
But I tell you what, there's a few things on theirs that didn't make it into our top 10, and the one that really jumps off the page at me, which frustrated 52% of their respondents, which was poor parking. So,
Oh yeah, definitely, especially in supermarkets, Tony. Supermarkets where they're just slightly over the line and then they open the door on your door. Oh.
oh, ouch. Anyway, it's nice to know that we started a trend. But what's the plan for this week?
Well, I think we're going to talk about, and I'm going to launch this now, is the elementary, the basic things about tacho rules that every HGV driver wishes they could ask, but they can't because they're too embarrassed to because they think they're so basic.
Excellent. Right. Let's crack into it then.
So, Tony, between us, we've compiled a list of things that drivers want to ask but daren't. About tacho and working time and that kind of bit of a dry topic, but any HGV driver wanting to know the answer to a question that they daren't ask are best listening on for the next few minutes, aren't they?
You will indeed, yeah. So the way we did this was to simply ask our drivers the kind of things that confuse them, still confuse them now, or perhaps confuse them when they first started out. So hopefully their asking of these questions will help kind of new drivers coming into it. But I think before we crack into it, my observation is that if you've got a driver that works in a specific industry, so when I was a truck driver, I used to do continental work.
Horses and carts, was that?
Well, when the accelerator was a whip.
You've used that before, haven't you?
Well, once or twice, yeah. So back in my day, this was the early 90s. I used to go to the south of France and back most weeks, sometimes Spain, sometimes Italy, but mainly France. And the things that would really affect me was trying to max out my driving time to get down to the south of France, how to minimize my overnight rest breaks, things like the ferry rule. So those were the things that I lived and breathed on a daily basis. But if you sort of compare and contrast that with, let's say, a builder's merchant driver, perhaps with a lorry-mounted crane, a HIAB, where they're probably not even going to drive 4.5 hours in a day. So working time's far more important, and the ferry rule doesn't even come into it. So the point I'm trying to get across is that depending on the sector that you work in, different rules will be more important than others, and it's critical, of course, that you understand the things that you're doing. and my sympathy, therefore, is with an agency driver who could be going from, a trunking job one day to a multi-drop job the next day, and will have to try and understand a variety of the different aspects of the rules.
Anecdotally, Tony, I did my transport management CPC, the very first one when the national and international was combined. So I was a guinea pig for that. 30% of what I learned was about the UK, 70% was about international. Now, the company I was working for had nothing to do with international, but because they were the first combined course, I learned how to move cattle through Slovakia at 3:00 on a Sunday morning, and it didn't apply to me.
Right. Yeah.
So some of these rules don't apply to drivers. But in order to have your CPC and therefore be a fully qualified HGV driver, you have to know the rules just in case, don't you?
Well, absolutely. So let's work our way through. And before we do, thank you to every single person that responded to us and was brave enough to say, actually, I don't understand this. And so thank you to all of you that responded. So let's crack into it. What have we got first, Phil?
Well, Tony, here's a good one that every HGV driver out there at some point will have either asked of themselves or will have been through this same situation. Here's the question. There's nowhere to stop for my brake and I need to take one. What do I do?
Panic! So it's a horrible thing if you're running out of time and you're coming up against your 4.5 hour drive or your 9 hours for the day or whatever, and you've got to stop. And we've had a couple of similar questions. So I'm running out of time close to base. I'm running out of time coming up to my break, and the answer is really the same. And DVSA will probably say to you at the roadside, you should have planned better. So, for example, if you've been driving 4 hours 15, that's not the time to join a motorway. That's the time to use the lay-by before the motorway to take whichever break you need before you get onto the motorway. But if you couldn't have foreseen perhaps a traffic jam on the motorway, so you join the motorway half an hour's worth of journey, but you've got stuck in traffic and it's become an hour, and you're running out of time and there's nowhere to stop, well, you just need to stop at the first safe place that you can find. And if you've run over your hours, you need to make a manual entry, which means running some paper out of the tachograph head and just writing a note on the back to say exceeded 4.5 hours driving or exceeded 9 hours or whatever it happens to be, and just explain the reason. And of course, being on your tachograph, it's time and date stamped. So it's technically a breach of the law, but it's mitigated by the fact that there's nothing you could have done about it, as long as you didn't dive on the motorway when you had no time to you're never going to have the time to do it.
Tony, this is going to come up a lot today about DVSA or VOSA under a previous guise, but they want to see that you're making an effort. They want to see that you're trying your best to stay within the rules. So if you're stopped by DVSA and you've got a manual entry that shows that you know that you've broken the law, but you're recording it, then they will look on that a lot more favorably than if you then start trying to mumble through. Well, yeah, I know, and I know that I should have taken a break 10 minutes ago, but no. If you've done a manual entry and you put it on the back and you say, yes, I knew I did what I did, but these are the mitigating circumstances, they're going to look a lot more favorably at you, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Okay, right. So hopefully that's that one sorted, isn't it?
So what's next, Phil?
I think we should go for, can I change the mode later if I forget?
No.
But no to the question, or?
No, you can't. Well, yeah. So basically, if you forgot to change the mode, you forgot to change the mode. The only thing you can do is to take a printout and confess on the back of that slip that actually what I was doing at that time wasn't what the tachograph was recording. It may have said other work, but I was actually on break. I forgot to select the modes, select the correct mode. That's all you can do. You can't time travel, Phil.
It comes back to the manual entry thing, doesn't it?
Mm.
It actually helps you an awful lot. It's there to help you, not to punish you, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's an easy one, wasn't it?
Yeah. What's next?
Here's a good one that's relating to our industry. As an agency driver, where and how do I dip my card?
Well,
I used that phrase, didn't I? Dipping the card. And you'd never heard of that before.
I'd never heard a driver ever say to me, "Dip my card." I kind of guessed what you meant when you said it, Phil. So I don't know if is this a Hampshire thing? Is this a Hampshire colloquial expression?
Dipping your card is putting your card into the reader either at the beginning or the end of your shift, isn't it?
Exactly. So for an agency driver, what you don't want to do is ever leave a customer's premises without having downloaded your card, because if the customer wants that data, you're going to probably get that phone call 3 days later, which is, Phil, you didn't download your card when you were here 3 days ago. Can you come back and do it, please? So just don't forget to do it. When you, at the end of the day, when you're giving your paperwork back, you're giving the keys back, just download your card at that point. That's the simplest, easiest way of doing it.
Supplementary question, Tony. What if you get back and everyone's gone home and you've got to put the keys through the letterbox?
Well, that can happen. And if that's the last day of that assignment, yes, that's an absolute pain and you may need to go back. Some of our customers have a card reader in a box on the wall outside, so you can still do it even though they might not be there. So, but best practice, start and end of shift, every shift, that's the best practice. But definitely when you're handing your keys over, handing your paperwork over, do you download or you dip at that point?
The trials and tribulations of being an agency driver, huh?
Yes. Okay.
So Tony, what's the next question? Hit me.
So we've got a question here, which is, what do I do if I forget or lose my card? And actually, that's two different questions in one, isn't it, Phil?
It is, absolutely. I'll take it in two different stages. If you forget your card, there's nothing you can do. You can't drive. There's nothing you can do about it. You've forgotten your card. The only thing you can do is go home and get it, because you can't drive without the card. However, if you've lost your card, then something that we've mentioned before, you can do a manual entry, but you have to have sent off for a replacement card. You have to have done that. And it's always best practice to take a photo of the evidence of the fact that you've sent it off. And the DVSA have got an obligation to send that to you within 15 working days so that you can continue to work. So there you go. If you've forgotten your card, nothing you can do about it apart from going home. If you've lost your card, then yes, you can do a manual entry, but you've got to apply for one straight away. And to cover yourself, make sure you take photos of your application for your replacement in case you get stopped roadside, and then you can prove that you've done it.
Excellent. Generally speaking, they'll come back in less than a week, but they are obliged to get them back to you within 15 days. So yes, whatever you do, don't leave your card at home. But if you have genuinely lost it, then yes.
It's like leaving your safety boots at home, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's an important part of your kit.
Yep, go back and get them.
Yes. You wouldn't leave without your sandwiches, would you?
No.
So, Tony, I got a multi-question for you here. Are you ready?
I'm braced and ready. Yes.
I'm going to combine three questions in one. So,
okay.
Here we go. So, what is the difference between driving and working time? A very popular question. What is the 17-18 week rule? And what is the night working limit? In 3, 2, 1, go.
So what we're really talking about is the Road Transport Working Time Regulations of 2005. So this is just to go back a large stride. Originally, we had something called the Working Time Regulations. So these were the Working Time Regulations were all about limiting the amount of work a worker could do in a given week or in a given reference period.
Driving or otherwise, yeah?
Sorry?
driving or otherwise?
This is nothing to do with driving. This is simply European law about working time.
Yeah.
When that law first came in, which was in the late 90s, the road transport industry said, whoa, leave us alone. We've got driver's hours rules. We don't need any of that stuff. Leave us alone. We'll look after ourselves. Thank you very much. So the road transport sector was effectively exempt from the working time regulations when they first came in. But then we had this kind of subset of the working time regulations, which was the road transport working time regulations. And the reason this was important was because, as we well know, drivers don't just drive and rest, they do work as well. So work might be loading, it might be checking the vehicle, it might be cleaning the vehicle. It could be a whole number of things where the driver is working but not driving. So the road transport working time regulations were designed to cover that. And actually, if you think about it, it makes perfect sense because, back in the day, I may have given this example before, but I remember one particular day, I loaded a trailer in Bristol full of satellite dishes that had to go to France. And I literally handball loaded an entire trailer of satellite dishes. It took hours, but I hadn't driven. I literally, that's the first thing I did that morning was to do that loading. I left there to drive to Dover to get on a ferry. Bristol to Dover, I'm guessing, what was that? 4 hours, 3.5, 4 hours or something. I was dog tired. I was shattered. But I was doing nothing illegal back in the 90s before the road transport working time regulations. So it's that kind of example that this particular law was introduced to protect drivers against, which basically said, Tony, if you spent 4 or 5 hours loading boxes onto a truck, actually, we're going to stop you at 6 hours. No worker can now work more than 6 hours without taking a break. And that's regulation 7 of the road transport working time regulations. So 6 hours, absolute maximum. So in my example, I couldn't have driven to Dover from Bristol, having spent 4 or 5 hours loading boxes first. I would have had to have taken a break at 6 hours. And the rule says that if you're going to be working more than 6 and less than 9 hours, you need to have half an hour total break. You can split that up into 15-minute blocks. And if you're going to be working over 9 hours, you need 45 minutes break. So regardless of your driving time, that working time will create those limits. In terms of the other parts of your question, you mentioned the 17-18 week rule.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the night working limit. Well, these are two things which sit within the road transport working time regulations, but can be what is called derogated from. So the night work limit says that if you're working at night, you can't work more than 10 hours in your total shift.
Yeah.
And night is defined as, for a truck driver, between midnight and 4 in the morning. So if any part of your shift sits between midnight and 4 in the morning, you can't work more than 10 hours unless that particular employer has created a workforce agreement that a group of drivers have agreed to, which would derogate or put it in simple language, ignore that rule with the consent of the workforce. And this 17-18 week rule is about reference periods. So I'm
still with you, Tony. I'm still with you. Keep going. You're doing well. Come on, sunshine.
So the 17-18 week rule is just literally a way of carving up the year into 3 blocks, and where the calendar falls determines whether it's 17 or 18 weeks. But it creates a reference period of, effectively, let's call it a third of a year, and that third of a year, on average, you may not work being a combination of driving and other non-driving work. You may not work more than an average of 48 hours per week during that time. But again, that's one of those things that through workforce agreement, can be derogated from.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all sorts of things. You can have rolling reference periods. You could have reference periods up to 26 weeks. And this is something that allows particular employers to create their reference periods around their kind of work schedules to make it more bespoke for their particular industry. So if you're unsure about it, you just need to speak to your employer, because there could be a group of drivers that have been there before you that were part of that elected committee that agreed to derogate. So you may not know what that rule is without asking the question.
Fantastic. Okay, take a drink now, Tony, because that was brilliant. That knowledge is fantastic. You've taught me some stuff, and anybody else that's listening to this, yeah, you've put it in really good terms there. Well done, mate.
Well, hopefully that was clear. So, Phil, what's next?
So, Tony, the next one. What about paying back reduced rest? Here we go.
Yes. This is one that's actually, it's not that complicated, but it can be difficult to explain. So, the first thing you need to understand is a standard weekly rest period is no less than 45 hours on block. So a continuous rest of 45 hours, you should do that every single week. However, once a fortnight, you've got the option to reduce that weekly rest. So anything less than 45 hours is reduced, but it can't ever be less than 24. So in other words, a weekly rest period of 24 hours or anything up to, under 45 hours, so 44 and a half hours, for example, that is a reduced weekly rest period. You've borrowed some time from the hours bank and you've got to pay it back. It's as simple as that. Now, to give it a practical example, let's just say you are a driver working for a builder's merchant. You work Monday to Friday. Every other week, you're required to work Saturday. So it could be the case that by the time you finish on Saturday, you haven't got enough hours. Let's say, for an argument's sake, you finished at 6 o'clock on Saturday evening and you start work again at 6 o'clock on Monday morning. There's only 36 hours between 6 o'clock Saturday and 6 o'clock Monday morning. So that 36 is less than your 45. It's 9 hours less than the 45. You owe the hours bank 9 hours. And you have to pay that back within 3 weeks following the reduction, and you can add that to a weekly rest period or a daily rest period. So in practical terms, let's use that example again. You're the builder's merchant driver. You've done a 6-day week. You finished at 6 o'clock on the Saturday evening. You started again 6 o'clock Monday morning. You owe 9 hours because you only had a 36. This next weekend coming up, let's just say you finished at 6 o'clock on Friday evening, and you're not going to start again until 6 o'clock on Monday morning. So you've got a grand total of 60 hours of rest now between 6 o'clock Friday evening and 6 o'clock Monday morning. Well, that 60 hours is actually 45 plus 15. So you've easily accommodated that 9 hours that you owe. So that just gives a kind of practical example. But the rule is when you take a reduced weekly rest period, anything under 45 hours, but can't be less than 24, whatever you've borrowed, you have to pay back by the end of 3 weeks following that reduction.
This is great podcasting, Tony. This is really good. I'm supposed to know all of this, and you're teaching me.
Well, we've got one left, Phil.
Okay, Tony, this is the sexiest one of the lot. It's talking about splitting the 45-minute break.
Yes. So the rules changed some years ago about splitting the break, and what it basically says is that the 45-minute break is the break that a driver must have after no more than 4.5 hours driving. So whether that's 4.5 hours straight or 4.5 hours, accumulated, you have to have a 45-minute break. But you have the option to split that break up and have it in two portions. So the minimum portion that counts is 15 minutes, but one of them has to be 30. So it's a 15 and a 30-minute break, although I'd always recommend at least 16 and 31, just because digital tachographs round to the minute. So just be careful with that.
Well, it makes more sense, doesn't it, Tony? Because at the earlier part of your shift, you're not as tired, so you should take the smaller break. And then towards the end of your 4.5 hours, you need a longer break. So yeah, if that makes it easier for understanding, you need a shorter break at the beginning and a slightly longer one as you're getting tired throughout your 4.5 hours.
Yeah, I think that's an easy way of remembering. Yeah, the longer one, the 30, is a bit nearer lunchtime if you're working during the day, and you might want a bit longer to eat. That's another way of remembering it. But yeah, so you can split that 45-minute break, and you split it into a 15 and 30 in that order.
And chronologically, it works because 15 comes before 30, becomes before 45, which is 4.5 hours. So there you are. There you are. We've answered all the questions, Tony, tonight.
Yep. But you don't have to split that break. You can do the 45-minute on block. That's not a problem. Although I would say do 46, not 45, just to be sure.
I think I need a taco break now, Tony. Goodness me. Or a working time directive one. Who knows?
Well, take your pick. Oh no, I think that's been really interesting, Phil, because the angle that we came when we're talking to the drivers, the angle we came at with them was, what are those questions you're too embarrassed to stick your hand up in a CPC course because you think you're supposed to know, and and it goes back to that old thing. The only stupid question is the one you don't ask. But I can understand why an experienced driver might be embarrassed to put their hand up on something that they're not familiar with, that perhaps they don't use every day in front of maybe younger drivers, and they perhaps just don't want to stick their head above the parapet. So hopefully this is a good forum for getting it out there.
And on a podcast, they can listen back and back and back, just in case they want to re-educate themselves all the time in those rules, because we all forget them. Yeah. I've forgotten half of what you said tonight. I fell asleep through half of it, but it's good to be able to refer back to it, even if you don't want to read it. You can glaze over sometimes Googling stuff. So sometimes it's better in audio than it is in the written word to be able to understand stuff. So yeah, congratulations, Tony, for taking 99% of the heavy lifting tonight. Thank you. I was in the easy chair.
And in all seriousness, if anybody's listening to this and they want clarification, we have got more material than you could shake a stick at. And if anybody wants anything sent to them, posted, emailed, whatever, we've got information aplenty. It's all over our website as well. So, if you want further information, please do get in touch. But
I'm the master of stupid questions, Tony. So if anybody wants to come to me and ask a stupid question, believe me, I've asked more stupid ones than that in the past. So yeah, come to me. Come to me.
So you've been listening to the Driver Hire podcast. Thank you very much indeed. So it's goodbye from me, Tony, from Driver Hire Croydon and Sutton.
It's a goodbye from me, Phil, from Driver Hire Royal Guildford. Thank you, Tony.
Royal Guildford. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can find us at thedriverhirepodcast.co.uk. And if you have enjoyed it, please do rate, review, and subscribe. And we look forward to talking to you next time.
Bye, everyone.